advantage of the soil block maker is that as a resource, you only have to buy once. Now these two here would probably cost you $50 together, which isn't a bad investment considering that you would easily spend that much on throwaway pots over a couple of years of gardening. With these, there's nothing to throw away. If you get really interested and want to expand your line, this one, now we're talking super soil blocks, turns out a block with a square hole in the top into which the 2-inch block fits. And now you have the full spectrum. But for many people, the combination of the three of these may be more than they want to invest. Can you make a soil block maker at home? You sure can. Let me show you how. I cut down a quart freezer container, about a third of its height. I found a nice fat short bolt, drilled a hole in the bottom, put the bolt through, found a washer that would go over it, and then a nut for the bottom. I did that because I wanted to make it deep enough so I could put one of those mini blocks in there. Now, with this one, you don't push it down in. You would take the potting mix and push it into it like that, because this has no plunger, and you have to leave some space for the mix to fall out. These don't always work perfectly, but they're the cheapest and simplest, and you can use the top as a plate to make it on. You put it down here, you give a bang on the top, maybe or two, shake it, and you have a reasonably nice soil block. Again, with a hole in the top for a big seed or one of those mini block makers.
While Eliot's busy making us some soil blocks, I'm going to get ready to plant them. I have some Clary sage seeds here. The Latin name is Salvia viridis. And I think I've got about 5 weeks before these will be ready to go into the garden. You want to know how long ahead to start the seed. Each one is different. Often the seed packet will tell you. If not, you might want to do a little research. Some seeds can be sown directly in the garden. This one probably could, but I have a very short growing season, so I start quite a few of mine ahead. But before you even think about planting, I'm going to do one important thing, and that's make a label. Salvia viridis, and I'm going to put today's date on the stick. That way if I get interrupted, I won't forget what it is I'm planting, and I'll know what's going to come up. Okay, now there's a number of ways to put the little seeds into these blocks. If it were fairly large seeds, I could probably pick them up individually and put them in. Another way to do it, if you're very careful, is to crease the packet and tap them one by one. But probably the simplest way, what we do most often, is to sharpen the end of a paintbrush or a wooden dowel, put the seeds on a white plate so you can see them easily, pick them up with a moistened stick, and one by one, pick them up and drop them into the little depression that the soil block maker makes in the block.
The magic thing about the soil block system is that it's completely modular. I can take this little tomato seed and put it in the block, and 10 days to 2 weeks later, it looks like that. Take that one, pot it on to the next size block, and 10 days to 2 weeks later, it looks like this. Take that plant and stick it either in a large block or in a pot like this, and a few weeks after that, you have as nice a tomato plant as anyone would ever want to grow.
So how long ago did you plant that tomato seed?
Just 6 weeks. Amazing. Give it enough room to grow and it'll grow.
Now I've got my little flat all finished, so I've put the label in. And now I have to think about where to put this to have it germinate. Every seed is different, and it helps to know whether it likes cool or warm temperatures for germination. If it likes a very cool temperature, say 65 degrees, I'll put it in a corner of my office where it's just about that. If it likes warm temperatures, 75, 80, even more, I'll stick it up on the top of the kitchen cabinet near the ceiling where it's always really warm. But most seeds like an average of about 70 degrees, and so I'll keep it on the kitchen counter or whatever place is handy at room temperature until it germinates.
And to get it to germinate, the real key is to have the moisture correct. And so Barbara and I put our little flats into a container like this, which has a fluted bottom, and into which we can pour some water just up to the flutes. You don't want to flood the seeds because then they won't germinate well, but we want to make sure there's a constant moisture supply. If we think they're a little dry, I'll take this spritzer occasionally and add some more moisture. Now, there's a cover that goes over this container, and that is what keeps the atmosphere in there perfectly moist while it's germinating. Now you notice we didn't cover the seeds, and you don't need to in a perfectly moist atmosphere, except for those few seeds that say on the back of the packet that they want to germinate in the dark. And if that were the case, I would have laid a little piece of black plastic down there before I put the cover on. Put the cover on, keep it moist, put it in a warm spot, and everything works perfectly. But keep your eye on them, because the minute they start to germinate, you want to take the cover off and put them in a warm, sunny window. Sun, not with the cover on, because then the heat in there is going to become too intense, because this is like a little closed greenhouse with no vents. Cover off in a sunny window the minute they germinate, and you're off and running.
And you really do have to keep checking them about twice a day. When we put them on top of the kitchen cabinet, we have to remind each other constantly. The other thing I do as soon as they germinate is to get out my little list. This is one area where I really do keep records, because I love to know how long it took for each seed to germinate. It not only helps me next year to know how far ahead I have to do things, but if I want to have two plants sharing a flat, if they both germinated about the same time, then I can move the whole plant to the right place at the right time for both those plants. Gardening Naturally will return on TLC.
And here's a flat of all germinated and ready to go.
Okay, those are the Salvia viridis that I started 8 days ago. So there they are, and they are definitely ready to be moved on to bigger soil blocks. Now I'll take this little tool, which is simply an artist palette knife that you can get at any artist supply store, and I'll cut out a little block, lift it up. Now it may have a taproot. One of the advantages of using soil blocks is that plants that don't like being disturbed when they're transplanted, because one reason or another, usually because they have a taproot, they do a lot better in a soil block than with another kind of transplanting system. And here's living proof.
Oh, the proof is in the plant.
Because here are some that were planted about 5 weeks ago, taproots and all, and they don't seem to have suffered one bit.
No, they look lovely. And one thing I mentioned earlier, the idea that in a soil block you get air pruning of the roots because the roots grow to the edge of the block, and instead of circling around as they do in a container, fill in the block and wait there to be transplanted in the soil. This is a perfect example of the advantage of soil blocks for almost all types of seedlings.
These are ready to go into the garden.
I think they are. Let's put them in.
Okay.